All right, the 6th day of December. Miranda was spending the day at her drafting table studying the sketches the prince had given her for the Christmas palace. She was eager to get started on the blueprints. Page after page of sketches were spread out in front of her, and her eyes were getting tired. The drawings were starting to all look the same. She was beginning to wonder if the task of building the Christmas palace might be too big for her. There were still so many things she had to learn about architecture. The prince had drawn sketches of the palace from every angle. Miranda admired his skill. The sketches of the Christmas palace were pretty good. She rubbed her eyes, and then rested her head on the table to take a little nap. Half an hour later, the prince came along to check on her progress. He found Miranda fast asleep. He tiptoed behind her and tickled her ribs. Miranda jumped. "Scared you, didn't I?" the prince said, grinning. "How's the work coming?" Miranda scowled. "I'm slowly getting to the blueprints." "Well, don't be too slow. Remember, the palace has to be finished by Christmas. You can always take a few shortcuts along the way." "There are no shortcuts. If you had gone to university, you'd know that," Miranda snapped. She was tired and irritable. "I don't have to go to university. I'm the prince. Who could teach me how to become a prince?" "Have you ever thought of becoming something other than a prince?" Miranda asked. "I like who I am. I'm good at being a prince." A good prince wouldn't lock up his wizard just because he chose to disagree. And a good prince wouldn't make all the palaces vanish just because he's afraid of competition. "Afraid of what competition?" the prince asked, growing tired of this argument. He had hoped to find Miranda in a good mood, perhaps even convince her to take a walk. Instead, she was grumpy. "You're afraid that the people of the kingdom might not like your palace," Miranda said. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I know. You're the prince." Miranda knew it was useless to argue with him. She sighed and turned her attention back to the sketches. Tandra and Balto were peeking out the window of the Nice palace. There was still no sign of Pendulum. "Come on, Tandra, it's time to eat. We can't wait any longer," Balto said. "The rice pudding is getting cold." Balto and Tandra joined Clipper at the dinner table to eat their rice pudding, occasionally glancing at the empty place that had been set for Pendulum. "Why isn't Pendulum here yet?" Clipper asked. "Pendulum gets confused sometimes, dear. He probably took a wrong turn along the way. Remember the last time he visited us? He arrived wearing his pajamas. He'd been so excited he forgot to change his clothes before he left." "Don't worry, I'm sure he'll be here tomorrow," Balto said, and they all took a spoonful of rice pudding in silence. Clipper wasn't convinced. It was true that Pendulum was often confused, but he was never late for a Christmas visit. Pendulum was a watchmaker. He was surrounded by clocks. Like all good watchmakers, Pendulum was always punctual. The nieces finished their meal and washed the dishes. Several garlands still waited to be hung about the room. The smell of fresh boughs and berries filled the air. "Remember, we must leave one garland for Pendulum to hang. It's tradition," Tandra said, admiring the decorations. "Now off to bed, Clipper. I'm sure Pendulum will be here when you wake up in the morning." Tandra was wrong. Finika had carried Pendulum to the troll castle. Archibald and Spike stood behind her in the dungeon as she dumped him into the sack onto the hard floor. "A real niece! We're going to be such good friends!" Archibald shouted, clapping his hands. "Trolls can't be friends with nieces. Trolls don't like nieces. How many times have I told you that?" Finika snapped. "I've never met a niece before. Maybe we'll like each other," Archibald said. Finika shook her furry paw at Archibald. "Nieces are sweet and round and soft. They smile all day and clean the loft. Their homes are filled with light and joy, good little girls and proper little boys. But trolls are fat and ugly too. Hold your breath while I take off my shoe. We like spiders and a dirty room. Whoever saw us with a broom? Nieces are polite and never lie. They never complain. They're always pleasant as pie. They greet each other with a how do you do. Even take baths. Yes, that too. But trolls are rotten to the core. Close that window and shut that door. Fresh air makes us sniff and sneeze. Whoever heard a troll say please?" "What's his name?" Archibald asked carefully, stepping closer to get a better look at their guest. "His name is Pendulum." "Pendulum! What a great name!" Archibald said, noticing the shiny oiling can that lay beside Pendulum on the floor. "What's this?" Archibald asked, picking up the oil can. "It's some kind of niece juice," Finika answered, snatching the oily can from Archibald's paws. She squirted a few drops into her mouth. "You wouldn't like it," she said, stuffing the oiling can back into her pocket. "Finika, can I stay here with the niece and guard him?" Archibald asked. "You? Do you think I'm out of my mind? You couldn't guard your own shadow. You're even afraid to walk past the family portraits and the troll gallery. You can't do anything like a troll." It was true. Archibald wasn't very good at doing any of the normal things trolls do. He didn't like to growl or knit his eyebrows in a grimace. He didn't like to take temper tantrums and turn blue. And, as Finika said, he was afraid to pass the portraits that hung on the walls of the castle. They all looked mean and grumpy. "Let's go upstairs," Finika said. "Pendulum won't wake up from his sleeping powder until tomorrow. Spike, stay here and guard the niece. Archibald and Fanica left the cell, locking the door behind them. Their shuffling footsteps disappeared down the corridor. Pendulum stopped snoring and opened his eyes. He wasn't really sleeping. He was just pretending. Fanica hadn't given him enough sleeping powder. What a predicament I've gotten myself into, he muttered, sitting up, brushing the straw from his clothes. Imagine me, Pendulum, being tricked by a troll. Spike gave a little bark, and Pendulum leapt out of the bed in the corner of the cell, his knees trembling. Nice doggy, easy boy, nice doggy, don't you go getting any ideas about eating me. Nieces taste terrible. But Spike began to wag his tail, jumped out of the bed, and licked Pendulum's face. You're a friendly little fellow, Pendulum said, scratching Spike behind the ear. You must belong to that other troll. I think we can be good friends, you and I. Pendulum looked around the cell for a way out, but there was no window. I have to get out of this dungeon and warn the nieces at the Nice Palace, he thought. He hopped off the bed and went to the door of the cell. He shook the bars, but they wouldn't budge. It was locked pretty tight. I suppose there's nothing for me to do but wait. I'm sure the trolls have some plan up their sleeves. He stretched his arms and yawned. I guess I'll have a little bit of sleeping powder in my nose. I'll just catch up on my sleep until I know what they want from me. I'll think clearer in the morning. Pendulum yawned and stretched out on the bed with Spike curled up at his feet. Everyone in the kingdom was preparing for another night's sleep, except Chloe. He sat in front of the fireplace, staring into the flames. So, the trolls have captured Pendulum and taken him to the troll castle, have they? He said to himself. Although Chloe was under house arrest, he was still able to glaze into the flames of his fireplace and see everything that was happening in the kingdom. Just as Fanica could look into her vat of boiling milk and search for the nieces, Chloe was able to look into his fireplace and search for trolls. But Chloe could not hear what the trolls said. He only guessed from glimpses he saw. Well, it would appear that Pendulum is safe for the moment. The trolls haven't hurt him. He's just a little groggy from the sleeping powder, but that will pass, Chloe said, yawning. I think the wind has carried some of that sleeping powder throughout the kingdom. I better go to bed, too. Will Miranda be able to finish the blueprints in time to build the new palace by Christmas? And will Pendulum be able to find a way out of the troll's dungeon? Until tomorrow. Good night.